Okay. Okay, I'll share my screen in just a moment for our presentation. We'll just let folks trickle in. Okay. So let me get shared. Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jose Murillo. I'm a policy analyst with the Office of the Director of Police Accountability. Today, we're going to be providing you with a presentation on automatic license plate readers. And with that, I'll hand it over to the director who will get us started this afternoon.
Good evening, committee members. We do see we got quite a few folks here, so we'll get started with our discussion. We are on the clock, so to speak. I do see we have at least one hand that's raised in the attendee section, and just want to make sure that I acknowledge you and that we will be able to get to community comments. We just have to provide an overview about the agenda for today and how we'll proceed today. If you could proceed with the next slide, please. Okay, so here's our agenda for today. I am the Director of Police Accountability here in the city of Berkeley, and I do want to thank you and welcome you to this community input session. We're really grateful that you as community members are able to join us today as we sit here today to gather to discuss an important matter concerning public safety in our city. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize that discussions on matters of public safety, they can evoke strong opinions and sentiments. However, it is crucial that we approach this dialogue with open minds, respect for diverse perspectives, and a shared commitment to the well-being of our community. First, I'd like to again extend my gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to join us here today. Your presence here reflects your dedication to actively participating in decision-making processes that shape our city's policies. It is through this open and inclusive dialogue that we can make sure that we make informed decisions that truly serve the needs and aspirations of our community. It's also worth noting that we're holding this community input session during a week that holds great significance to us as Americans, the week in which we celebrate our independence through the 4th of July holiday. This occasion reminds us of the principles upon which our nation was founded on, and including the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So it is in this spirit that, in the spirit of freedom and community, that we convene here today, striving to ensure that our city's policies uphold these cherished values. The focus of today's discussion is the potential acquisition of automated license plate readers, or ALPR, as are commonly referred to by the acronym, by our police department. These technological tools have the potential to impact the way law enforcement operates in our community, and it's crucial that we thoroughly evaluate their potential benefits and risks. As the Police Accountability Board considers the proposed policies regarding ALPRs, it is vital that we gather diverse input from community members like you. Your perspectives, concerns, and insights will greatly inform the decision-making process of the City Council and help shape the policies that govern this technology's usage in our city if adopted. Let me emphasize that the purpose of the input session is to create an inclusive space for dialogue where different viewpoints can be shared and understood. We encourage everyone to engage respectfully and constructively, ensuring that all voices are heard and valued. By doing so, we can foster a sense of trust, collaboration, and accountability within our community. Once again, thank you for your presence and commitment to shaping the future of our city. So as you can see in the slide before you, the overview, we're going to do a thorough review of what we like to call community agreements that spell out a little bit more about the agreements that we expect out of this dialogue today. We're going to have an overview by our policy analyst of the Berkeley Municipal Code 2.99, the acquisition and use of surveillance technology. We're going to do an overview of the proposed license plate readers technology, of the technology itself, then an overview of the legislative history, an overview of the department's proposed policies, and the initial position of the police accountability boards on these policies. Then we'll go ahead and open discussion and do Q&A. I do believe, though, our policy analyst has a note about the Q&A session, if you can provide some guidance there.
Sorry, I was muted for a moment. But yes, as some of you have already found, we have enabled the Q&A section. As you have questions through the presentation, feel free to drop them in that chat box. What we'll do at the end of the presentation is that we'll review the questions or comments that were submitted there. Zoom does have the feature to upvote any questions. So if you see a question in that chat box and you think, wow, that's a great question, you can vote for it and it'll go up towards the top. We'll try to get to as many hands as we can during our last portion as well. Again, I also see that, again, recognizing the hands are already raised, we will have that opportunity. But again, the Q&A chat box is open. In case there's any questions that come up through that process, feel free to drop them in there. We'll be monitoring them as we go along.
And I do see a note about closed captioning. Could you just confirm if that's already enabled for the community members? You're muted.
Sorry, yes, it is enabled, closed captioning. And then there's also a question about the Q&A. That box that I'm referring to is where the comments are being submitted.
So we'll go ahead, if you can advance to the next slide. Discuss our community agreement. Okay. One of the things that the main points here is to be both teachers and learners, challenge ideas, not people, practice active listening, show respect and empathy, and take accountability. Again, I want to emphasize that public safety discussions can evoke a lot of strong emotions and sentiments. We understand there's a lot at stake when we're authorizing our government, whether local or at the state level or the federal level, to be able to utilize technologies to monitor our community members. We know that these have real life impacts. We also do know that community members are concerned for personal safety and also safety of property. So we want to make sure that we're being respectful of all these diverse viewpoints and making sure that we're providing the space. We are again going to be reporting back to the Police Accountability Board. The feedback that we're receiving here at the board continues to consider the department's proposed policies. They will be meeting for their next regularly scheduled meeting on July 12th. So it is our task to memorialize the feedback we receive here and present it to the board at this next board meeting. And we can go ahead and we'll revisit the community agreements before we start the discussion.
Okay. So again, my name is Jose Murillo. I'm the policy analyst here with the Office of Director of Police Accountability. And we just want to start today with the Berkeley Municipal Code 299, or the acquisition and use of surveillance technology. I know during a lot of the Police Accountability Board's meetings, during the council meetings, you often hear us referring to BMC 299 or the surveillance ordinance, which is what we'll be covering today. So we just want to give that overview before we get into the technology itself. So the goal of BMC 299 is to essentially establish a process for the procurement and use of surveillance technology in a way that considers both public safety and privacy and civil rights. Transparency is the main theme behind this ordinance. It's crucial in the consideration of any surveillance technology that we are transparent. And again, it emphasizes that surveillance technology can benefit public order and safety, but it could also jeopardize privacy and civil liberties if it's abused. So the decision on the surveillance technology should always prioritize the impact on civil rights and civil liberties as guaranteed by the California and US constitutions. And under that general principle is that the city passed this ordinance. Again, as part of the ordinance, it requires an evaluation of the financial costs associated with the acquisition, the installment, the use, and the maintenance of any surveillance technology. It states that City Council should govern decisions on funding, acquisition, and the use of the surveillance technology. So this is where you hear a lot of the mandate for a policy like we're covering today. And it also includes, or it also requires that certain safeguards, including transparency, the idea of oversight is in terms of the scope of our work, and accountability measures are set in place, of course. And then there's data reporting, just to measure that there's compliance with the initial intent and that civil liberties, civil rights and civil liberties are being safeguarded. Right. So our role, or rather the role of the Police Accountability Board with BMC 299 is that we are in essentially the review body for some of these policies. The city manager, whenever there will be a new surveillance technology on behalf of the police department, must present a surveillance use policy for each technology to the Police Review Commission, which is now, of course, the Police Accountability Board, before City Council adopts it or essentially considers it for adoption. The Police Accountability Board must receive a corresponding surveillance acquisition report, as well as the surveillance policy and then the use policy, which we'll differentiate as we go later on. So it's 3 documents that accompany these reviews. These policies have to be given to the Police Accountability Board within 30 days, or rather the review has to be completed within 30 days of receiving the policy. And the board has to vote whether to accept, whether to recommend approval, object to the proposal, recommend modifications, or take no action. Of course, the opposition or failure by the Police Accountability Board to act on these policies does not prevent the city manager from proceeding with their own review and potential adoption. Again, we're a recommending body in this regard. So what are automatic license plate readers? ALPR systems are essentially cameras that capture images of license plates automatically. The images are converted into text using special software. They convert plate numbers and they essentially capture plate numbers and compare with databases of vehicles of interest. Law enforcement and other agencies use ALPRs to identify vehicles they're looking for. When a vehicle of interest is detected, the system notifies the officer through the procedures that various departments have. So again, what are they used for? They're used for rapidly identifying and locating vehicles of interest to law enforcement. Again, they compare license plate encounters with law enforcement databases, which is often referred to as hot list, for active investigations such as missing persons, stolen vehicles, or stolen license plates. They assist the identification of suspects, victims, and witnesses by canvassing license plates near crime scenes. And they're also used as acting as a search tool with limited information comparing license plate details. So just a bit of the legislative history as we go into the final stages of this review. The ALPR discussion, or at least some of the preliminary discussion, started back in 2021 when the Public Safety Policy Committee made a recommendation for a budget referral proposing the acquisition of fixed ALPRs. On November 30th, 2021, the budget referral was presented to the City Council and it was approved by a majority of council. The budget referral included the installation of ALPRs at strategic locations, the allocations of funds in the 23-24 fiscal year budget and the development of a policy governing the use of ALPR policies, which is what we're reviewing today. So part of that condition was that a policy had to be developed and approved by the council before they could proceed. On May 11th, 2023, so about 2 years later, a little under 2 years, those policies were developed and they were transmitted to the Police Accountability Board for review. On June 15th, after receiving those policies, the Office of the Director of Police Accountability provided a report to the Police Accountability Board titled Automatic License Plate Readers in the City of Berkeley, a preliminary review of proposed ALPR policies by the Office of the Director of Police Accountability, which was submitted to the Police Accountability Board. This report was primarily research of the different sources that are available, as well as some of the different policies that are currently implemented in place. The next day, the Police Accountability Board held a special meeting to discuss the proposed ALPR policies. The board voted ultimately to object to the acquisition report and the proposed policies as presented. The Police Accountability Board sent an objection letter to the BPD and the City Council. Then on June 20th, the Public Safety Policy Committee also held a special meeting to discuss the ALPR policies and the considerations of the concerns of the Police Accountability Board. They voted to send a qualified positive to the City Council with condition that the board and the police department work to address the concerns that were expressed in the board's letter. On June 27th, Chair Moore, the chair of the Police Accountability Board, Board Member Wilson, Sergeant Liddell, and ODPA staff met to discuss and articulate some of the concerns and the objections of the letter. This was not necessarily the official position of the board, but it was really to set the framework for our upcoming meeting where the board will make their final decision on the matter. And then again, actually just today, we received the updated policies for the board to include in its next agenda packet. And then, of course, as I stated on July 12th, the board is going to convene for the regular meeting where the new ALPR policies will be discussed further, and the board will further discuss their stance on the technology. And then, of course, on July 25th, the BPD will present its acquisition report and use policies to the full City Council. I do just want to make a note that tomorrow the board will be posting their agenda where we'll make these documents available. Okay, Director.
Thank you for that. So in summary, what the acquisition report is as acknowledged or as referenced in the ordinance, the BMC ordinance, is the police department or the city manager has to make the case for why they want to acquire a new surveillance technology or they want to utilize from with the support of nearby departments. In this case, the Berkeley Police Department's acquisition report provided this purpose for acquiring this surveillance technology. They are, just to also clarify, ALPRs can be affixed, as our policy analyst mentioned, on vehicles. At this time, it is not the department's wish to do so. They want to fix them in locations, so fix the street posts, street lights, or other similar objects owned by the city of Berkeley or covered by a right-of-way agreement. The ALPRs are commonly used to alert police of wanted vehicles or vehicles of interest entering the jurisdiction, and the technology is increasingly used on local freeways, bridges, and sometimes in private parking lots. So this is language directly from the acquisition report, which is publicly available. It has been included in our agenda packets and also in the City Council's Public Safety Committee packet. And feel free to contact us at any time if you want to have access to these documents. The next slide, please. Okay. The justification as articulated in the acquisition report, the police department's investigators, they have identified instances where the effective deployment of this technology could have helped focus on wanted vehicles and potentially prevented crimes in the city. They noted these different categories of crime, theft of vehicles, incidents of armed robbery, property-related crimes, homicide cases, sex, domestic violence crimes. And in their acquisition report, they do provide several cases where they could have utilized the technology to solve those crimes. If you could proceed with the next slide, please. Another element of this is the location and where will these, how many and where will they be placed around the city? The police department proposes to install 52 ALPRs in the city of Berkeley. Again, there's our permanent locations. They are going to be, the specific locations haven't been identified yet, but they will want to solicit input from the vendor who has not been chosen at this time because they're in the process of getting council approval to acquire them. So if the council were to approve this technology in the city, the police department would then potentially will identify a vendor, and they want to work with that vendor to look at the locations around the city where they will put these fixed cameras in. The impact, as articulated by the police department in their acquisition report, they want to utilize the resources effectively. As we know, the city is facing a hiring crisis, hiring and retention crisis, and not only in the police department, but across many departments. If you haven't looked at the city auditor's recent report, that gives you good context of the current state of the city right now in terms of hiring and retention. But one of the ways that police departments, not just the Berkeley Police Department, but other departments around the country, have been able to overcome some of these challenges in personnel is through the adoption of these technologies, which is what the department proposes here. They do recognize, the department, the need to protect ownership and control over shared information and protect the privacy and civil liberties of the public in accordance with federal and state law. And also noted in the acquisition report that the units will help to prevent unauthorized, there will be procedures in place that help prevent unauthorized use of the data. The procedures will ensure that data is not used in any way that would violate or infringe upon anyone's civil rights and or liberties, including but not limited to potentially desperate or adverse impacts on any communities or groups. And again, this is language from the acquisition report. If you can proceed with the next slide. Okay, so there are two, in addition to the proposed, the acquisition report, there are two policies that the department has drafted. There is what would fall under the directions for the officers at the street level and any of the operators of this technology. And then there is the other policy that provides more of the articulation that is legally required for this use of technology. But policy, BPD policy 422, the purpose of this policy is to provide guidance for the capture, storage, and usage of the digital data obtained through the use of ALPR technology. Department personnel shall adhere to the requirements of fixed ALPRs in this policy, as well as corresponding surveillance use fixed ALPR policy 1305. And you could advance to the next slide, please. Okay, so the other policy that is attached to this surveillance technology policy is 1305. And the purpose of that policy is to provide guidance, again, very similar language, but this one is to ensure that it is meeting the legal requirements, both at the state level, federal level, but also in compliance with any Berkeley local laws and ordinances. You can advance to the next slide. Okay.
Okay. So as we noted earlier, at their June 16th meeting, the Police Accountability Board voted to write to the Public Safety Policy Committee, as well as the City Council and the Berkeley Police Department, to express their concerns about the policies that were proposed to the board. There's four primary areas that the board was concerned about and that they had the opportunity to address to the Public Safety Committee. The first one was, of course, the concerns over civil liberty protections. The proposed acquisition report and as the board stated, the proposed acquisition report and policies need to provide stronger safeguards and assurances for protecting civil liberties and privacy rights. The PAB emphasizes the importance of ensuring that the acquisition and use of ALPRs do not infringe upon the rights of individuals in the community. The second concern was that there's a lack of empirical support or data. The Police Accountability Board, as they stated, has noted a lack of empirical evidence or data demonstrating the effectiveness of that technology in achieving its intended goals within the city of Berkeley. While acknowledging the reported increase in crimes in specific categories, the PAB highlights the need for an analysis of comparable jurisdictions with or without this technology to determine its potential effectiveness. Solid evidence is crucial before moving forward with the acquisition to ensure its significant contribution to solving crime investigations and enhancing public safety. So again, those were just two of the four, and I'll proceed to the next two. There was also concerns about the true cost. In their letter, the board noted that, the Police Accountability Board stated that it has expressed concerns about the true cost associated with the technology, included potential hidden costs, maintenance expenses, and long-term financial commitments. It is imperative to have a comprehensive understanding of the financial implications and ensure that the benefits outweigh the costs. And then lastly, the last concern that was noted was the lack of completeness of the acquisition report and the proposed policies. In their letter, they stated the proposed policies require further clarity, elaboration, and editing. Specifically, the PAB calls for a clear outline of the intended uses of the data, retention periods, access controls, and measures to protect against potential misuse or unauthorized access. The inclusion of more information about minimum training requirements for the users of the technology is also requested. So again, these were the analysis that was initially provided. This was in response to the initial policies that were provided to the board and have been workshopped with the department to an extent. The board has not taken official position just yet in terms of the ALPR policies, but these were just their initial analysis that they'll continue at the next meeting on July 12th. Okay. Okay, so we've reached the end of our presentation. We're very cautious to allow time for folks to provide their input. As I noted at the start of the presentation, the way that we will be proceeding with this is that we'll be looking at the Q&A list first to see if there are any questions there that haven't been answered. We have been monitoring it, and we see that there's a few comments there that want to be for the record, and we assure you that they will. We'll then open it up to live questions. Again, we do have a good amount of participants here joining us today, and we do have a few hands raised, so we'll make sure to give enough time for folks to express their comments. And then we'll end it with any closing comments as we move forward to the next steps. So with that said, we'll just take a few minutes to look over the Q&A. Again, if you don't necessarily wish to speak, but you still want to answer a question, that's a great, or ask a question, it's a great tool.
And
Okay.
could you please put the community agreements just as a reminder to guide us as we engage in this conversation? And I do
Yes.
want to, if I may, just make sure that we're communicating effectively. The board's position at this moment, it was to object the acquisition report and the policies as presented. They have provided guidance to the police department, and we did receive a response to some of the concerns that were raised by the board. Those responses were provided today by the police department. They will be in the agenda packet, and the board will further discuss their stance based on this new information and the addressing the concerns that have already been brought forth by the Police Accountability Board.
Okay. And then I'll start with the Q&A questions. The first question that I have, and it's more of a procedural aspect on our end. Are closing comments going to be from attendees or from the PAB? So we will, go ahead, Director.
So I do want to just say that we are assisting the board in this process. This is not a board meeting per se. So the comments that we would, the office will make as we facilitate this input session will not necessarily be representations of the board. We do have individual board members and we have a lot of community members logged in and they're more than welcome to make any comments throughout this discussion. But I do want to make sure that we're communicating that effectively, that this is not necessarily a event that's being hosted by the Police Accountability Board, but rather by the office in our capacity as the administrative support of the board.
Okay. So quite a few questions. Oh, and there's a clarifying question as to that. Do attendees have a chance to make comments tonight or only ask specific questions? Yes, you will have the opportunity to make comments when we get to the live questions aspects of it. My apologies if we weren't clear with that. But yes, you will be allowed to either ask a question or make a comment. Okay. So the next question is, so what is the estimated cost of performing the case control studies that the PAB indicates is needed to inform this proposal? How do these costs compare to the program cost?
So that's a great question. Another disclaimer in this conversation, there's some questions that may be beyond the scope of what we intend to do tonight. We will register any questions and we'll try to follow up with any community member that has a more targeted question that's going to require more research. But feel free again to register your questions and comments. The goal here is to receive input so the board can make informed decisions in their recommendations.
Okay. The next question is, will BPD have a contractor actually operating the cameras, collecting the data, etc.?
So it is in the acquisition report and the policies, they do describe the logistics and the mechanics by which the operators will be able to utilize this. So there will be officers if the department is approved to have this technology. The vendor will then provide training. There will also be some training to ensure legal compliance. And the operators that are trained to utilize the technology would be able to access the databases and where the license plates are being kept and be able to access that information. So there is a training component that's being provided by the vendor, but also by different components like the legal requirements that will be necessary to ensure compliance with this technology.
Then this next question you've briefly touched on, Director. Will all BPD department officials have access to the surveillance data?
As the policy and acquisition report currently reads, it will be individuals that are trained on this department. It is not my understanding that all department members will necessarily be trained on this, but anybody that does utilize the technology will be trained on it.
Okay. And then this is a set of 3 questions, but they all relate. So in regards to the data, will it be shared with other law enforcement agencies and or private organizations? How many wrong arrests have been made using ALPR technology? Is there data to support the claim that ALPR does in fact solve crime?
So then those are great questions in terms of sharing. Those are the sort of nuances that I think the board was very concerned about and making sure that the language is clear on that. If there is a legal requirement for the department to share any information, like a subpoena is provided to the department, then that would need to be considered. But there was also a conversation at the Public Safety Committee, what role will the department and or our city attorney office play in potentially quashing any subpoenas that would potentially contradict our current policies and or ordinances within the city. So there is some element where there may be sharing with other law enforcement agencies. There is no, to my knowledge, and please correct me, Mr. Murillo, is there any intention of sharing this information with private organizations? If we don't have that information, we'll certainly get back to community members.
We can certainly get back, but our understanding with the conversations that the board had at the special meeting and at the policy committee on behalf of council, private organizations are not being contemplated. There's a big emphasis that the policy, there's a big emphasis within the policy that the data wouldn't be shared with outside agencies. They specifically dropped, and this isn't necessarily a private agency, but more of a federal agency with ICE or other federal agencies for those enforcement matters. Again, you noted previously in terms of whether they're legally obligated to is a different question that has to be considered on a case-by-case basis. But again, the BPD, at least as written through the policy in the recent conversations, expresses that the information won't be shared with other agencies, again, unless there's a legal obligation to do so. Okay, so we do have a few more questions that have trickled in. And I will, okay. So this question says, will ALPR be provided to the police to help identify automobiles nearby the locations at times of crimes reported to the BPD?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to look for that question.
It's towards the
What's the timestamp on it?
634.
We provided to the police to help identify automobiles nearby the locations at times of crimes reported to the BPD. So the way the technology works, if there is a license plate or a vehicle of interest, they could potentially enter that into the database, and that would then potentially, if that vehicle is identified in one or the other fixed cameras roaming around the city, it can give a hit for the officer to be able to flag it as a vehicle of interest. There are other legal thresholds that the department the officers must be able to satisfy before any enforcement action is taking place. So they would need to have reasonable suspicion and probable cause to pursue any further action, even if they have a hit of a vehicle license plate.
Okay, the other question that came in around that time is, will the operators who have access to data be bonded and have to take an oath to confidentiality?
So the operators of the technology, there's language within the policies regarding the privacy implications of this data, and also there's language regarding any repercussions for the unlawful or impermissible use of this technology. So they do have to ensure that they're complying with current oaths of office that they have as officers or operators.
And then you briefly touched on this next question, but the question is, can officers ask for the trained officers to retrieve data from the ALPR database and provide it to them?
They're great logistical questions. So if that is part of an investigative procedure, the individual that is seeking or is accessing the database would have to be trained. The operator would need to consider whether a fellow officer or a person within the department seeking information is doing it for lawful purposes. So there would need to be a discussion there. Why are you accessing the data, and have that conversation? But that is, I think, one of the logistical questions of how this looks in real life when you have some department officers or department employees that are trained and others that aren't. So that is something that needs to be contemplated further.
Okay. The next question is, what example of civil liberties that will be impacted by implementing these cameras? And are there reports that this happens in other cities where this has been implemented?
And if you can go back to the slide regarding the board's stance, there is an articulation there about the board's concerns with civil liberties. And when we're ever talking about amassing the data like this, there's always the implications on privacy and how will this data be used and how will it be protected. It's not just the license plate itself, which is in public view, and there's no necessarily expectation of privacy with your license plate per se, but you have one of the important considerations here is that the technology allows for the tracking of movement. So the ALPR data could potentially indicate, if you have 52 cameras around the city, the movements of a particular license plate throughout the city, and that is the civil liberty component of this. And we have to ensure that we're utilizing this technology in a judicious manner.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I'll get to some of the questions now from folks that haven't had their question answered just yet. This question states, where will the information reside, on locally controlled servers or on the server of the provider? And I'll just tie this in with another question that was asked in, which kind of ties in, since we don't have a vendor, how can you guarantee they'll comply with the COB surveillance policy and data sharing? And then I think, sorry, I connected those two questions because in a way they sort of answer each other in one way or the other. At this time, we don't necessarily, again, because there isn't a vendor, we don't know the specific way that the data will be stored. There's talks within the department, and from what we've been informed, that they're looking more at a cloud-based platform, as many of the vendors offer that service. It's supposed to be more cost-effective than storing a large amount of data locally. And that's in terms of the answer to that question. And then again, to the previous question about how could we guarantee they follow BPD's policy, it is also our understanding that vendors tailor the product to the specific city and their policy. Okay. So again, we won't be able to get through all of our questions today in terms of the Q&A, but we will get back to them as many as we can. We're going to move on to the live comment just because we do have a good amount of folks waiting to provide their comment there. So again, we see and hear your questions. They are part of our record. Just for the interest of time, we're going to move on to live comment. You're more than free to participate there as well. Okay. Okay, one moment. Okay. So John Canner, you're being granted permission to speak. We're asking folks to try to limit their comment for 2 to 3 minutes at most, just because we do have a good amount of folks. So we'll go ahead and give you that permission. Again, John Canner.
Yes, thank you. I'm John Kaner. In my day job, I'm CEO of the Downtown Berkeley Association, but I'm not speaking on that behalf because our board hasn't had a chance to weigh in on this. I'm speaking as a neighbor and on a personal level. My husband and I live 3 blocks from the police department, and since the beginning of the year, we've had 2 carjackings within a block of our house. We've had a student badly beaten and robbed 3 blocks away. Or we've had a 70-year-old woman who was attacked and robbed. and we're not feeling safe in our neighborhood. We fully support automated license plates readers. We need to discourage criminals from committing crimes in Berkeley, and we need to provide BPD the tools that they need to apprehend folks who engage in criminal activity. So please, please, please fully support this. And thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Okay. So we will now go on to Sagar Jathani, and I apologize if I mispronounce any names in advance. But Sagar, you should have permission to speak now.
Thank you. 3 years ago, the city council voted to reimagine policing. Part of that overhaul was this idea that police shouldn't be conducting routine traffic stops because of racially disparate outcomes. So the preferred solution, creating a Department of Transportation, was blocked on other grounds, legal grounds. You fast forward to today. As John was just saying, we're in the midst of a significant increase in crime in Berkeley, especially violent crime, like what he described. We're seeing residents held up at gunpoint by criminals riding into town from other communities, dramatic number of carjackings and other violent crimes involving vehicles. The goal was to reimagine policing, not abolish it. License plate readers are an easy, cost-effective solution, one that's used by thousands of other communities around the country. I'm sure you guys know the stat, but nearby, Vacaville saw a 33% decrease in auto theft and a 35% increase in arrests after installing LPRs. Meanwhile, here in the city of Berkeley, we've seen a 43% increase in auto thefts over just the past 6 months. It's time to get behind this reasonable measure. There's perception that sometimes the PAB will block whatever it is the police department wants. This is a great chance to prove those critics wrong. The concerns that are raised are perfectly reasonable, but I think that those concerns have been addressed by the Berkeley Police Department. And I'm hoping that people can get behind this and we can start getting a lid on reducing violent crime in Berkeley. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Kit Saginor, you have been allowed permission to speak.
Hi, my name is Kit Sagnor. I'm really concerned about effectiveness and whether or not, and it appears not, that ALPRs will actually help in the prevention of crime. And then there's several different aspects to this. I'll try to be brief. One issue actually is an error rate, and some of that error rate, I don't know what the cause of it is, but it means that people who are not committing a crime can in fact get in trouble and put on the hot list and so forth. One issue I know that it contributes to the error rate is people actually altering their license plates. You really need to find out what's happening in New York City at this point. In New York City, there's this huge rash of plates being altered or false plates being, particularly false paper plates being put on cars, even by people who are otherwise law-abiding, in order to defeat parking tickets and highway tolls. So ALPR technology becomes rather ineffective if all the people you're trying to catch are obscuring or changing their plates. The strategies for defeating LPRs are already known to criminals and who already use it. You're foolish if you think that criminals will not adapt to increase in ALPR technology. In terms of car theft, criminals can switch license plates with a parked car. They can use counterfeit plates. They can steal a car at 10 p.m., complete their crimes during the night, and dump the car before the owner has realized in the morning that the car is missing and reported as stolen. Particularly swapping plates is something that it can go without detection for some time. Most people, if they go out in the morning, will not notice that the license plate on their car is not the same license plate that was on it yesterday. So it can be quite some time before a stolen license plate gets reported. Meanwhile, the legitimate owner of a car is driving around with a stolen plate on their car that was put on their car by the thief. And so that causes even more problems. What we really need is prevention of crime. And particularly in the case of vehicle theft, there are ways to look at where the thieves are, what's happening with the thefts, and to look into that. It was just mentioned that there was a 43% in auto thefts in Berkeley just recently. The largest part of that increase, in fact, I think the entire increase was caused by increased theft of Kias and Hyundais, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, which apparently were sold with defective technology, making them so easy to steal that you can look at a YouTube video and go steal a car in 15 minutes or less. The other type of car that's easy to steal are Honda Civics and Honda Accords that are 20 years old or older. Once you know which cars are the ones that, and this is not just Berkeley, throughout the state of California, the statistics from the California Highway Patrol show that 31% of the automobiles stolen in California in 2022 were the Kias, Hyundais, or old Hondas. So for prevention, right, fix the software, pressure the companies to fix the software on the newer cars. And on the older cars, the owners of those cars can be provided with information and resources about protecting their vehicles, perhaps even including a program to help them obtain low-cost trackers to hide in their cars. And that way it will be easier to find those particular cars if they're stolen. And if you can cut down considerably on the theft of those cars, you will have actually prevented in advance from its happening a lot of vehicle theft. And I think some of the other things that involve tracking of vehicles need to be looked at the same way, so that the city should be doing prevention rather than trying to chase after them with ALPRs, at which point the criminals just adjust their methods so as to make your ALPR readers rather not very helpful for finding particularly those cars that are involved with the commission of a crime. Thank you very much. And please also look, as I said, at the error rate for ALPR readers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just one moment. Okay. Mari Mendoza, you should be allowed to speak now.
Okay, hello?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, and I appreciate all the work. I want to thank you both for presenting this evening and allowing an opportunity for community to chime in. And thank you for all your work and trying to be thorough in how you're looking at all of the aspects that the considerations will or have the potential to affect the entire diverse community membership. One of the most interesting things that I think we all have to continue to remind ourselves, and I think Kit's point about criminals adopting to rules, and even the fact that we have all kinds of laws and rules and people committing crime, even still that we have those laws and rules and even cameras and whatnot. Crime is typically enacted, and especially in a society where there's much foundational and systemic injustice, you know, and we always look at crime as pointing the finger at people being criminal. But the initial crime in our society is inequity, right? It's predatory capitalism. It's the way that we marginalize people with the least and keep them pinned down in a place of no return, right? Currently, our economy has gotten to the place where people cannot afford to live. We can't afford the apartments. The percentages in terms of how we define even affordable housing is not accurate, because we take in the highest earners in our community to the lowest. And so when we find a median, it doesn't even support or help low income, extremely low income, because we're looking at this vast difference of folks in our community. So it's really important also to look historically at how police surveillance has been used in racial profiling and discrimination. And like I said, when colonizers came to the community and came to this continent, it's the similar kind of propaganda that we're hearing now, right? It's making criminals out of the folks who are not conforming, or the folks who are not determining and defining what is the society that is creating all the rules, right? Rules and regulations and systems for which that society is going to operate. And we are in a dangerous moment now, because you can see that this is paralleling exactly that same kind of tactic. We have folks who are coming in, they're grabbing land, they're, people who can afford the high price and inflation of the cost of housing, which should be a human right constitutionally. When we go back to what was said at the beginning in terms of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, housing is a human right. Housing is something that should not be commodified. And we just excuse the market and the commodification of it to be fine with creating homelessness. Seniors are going to be the next big wave of homeless people. And are we just going to just turn our cheek and just say, oh, it's the economy and it's their fault? We have to take responsibility. We are in a day and age where we have so much information. We have history. My son is studying in high school, my youngest son, all this history, and they talk about the bourgeoisie. They talk about all these times in history where we've seen this exact same tactic being used to criminalize communities and use and extract and take whatever the powers that be want to come and extract, whether it's land, whether it's resources, whether it's slave labor, whatever it is. So we have a responsibility as human beings, supposedly the most intelligent creature on the planet Earth, to have some integrity, to practice humanity, to understand that it is the structure and the foundation of white supremacy and the society and the culture that we live in. That it's not, we're not fighting crime, people. We are looking at things that are harming the community. We're harming people, we're harming the planet, we're harming everything. We need to have a holistic and truthful approach to how we are going to address equity and injustice and terrorism, really, that is just rampant. It's not just here, it's global. So I appreciate the work that's going into this. The other thing I will just add on, you at the beginning, you said that to have an open mind, right, include diverse perspectives, and that this conversation and theoretically all of our conversations with council and electeds are to inform and shape their decisions. But what I've witnessed is that there are particular agendas that support other agendas. And the folks who usually control those are the people with the most wealth and power, because they have the most voice and influence. And so we actually aren't having robust conversations. We actually aren't including diverse perspectives. We actually aren't including the truth of all the different people in our community. We aren't protecting the civil liberties of all people. So we need to step that up. We need to be accountable. We need to be honest. We need to be truthful and really do engage in the way that that you had presented at the beginning, right? True open mind, true inclusivity, true diverse perspectives, true harmony, humanity, and love. And I think the folks who are talking about reimagining public safety, nothing has been implemented. The community has had a beautiful vision, and some community members actually have taken their personal time to do training to deal with people who are going through mental health crisis, so that as a community member, they are having training to step in and do something that's more peaceful, that's more mindful, that's more based in humanity, to deal with those things. We haven't seen any of that implemented by the promises and the people who have campaigned for that. We haven't seen that implemented. So we should not, be careful about attacking that, because no one's even really tried that yet. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak and to share, and for, including us in the conversation this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Murillo, could we put a timer, or at least if not a visual one, then have one chime up? We do have a few more members of the community who want to engage, and we are at this time going to be going to 7:30, so we want to make sure that we're budgeting time accordingly.
Yes.
If you have one on the screen to visually, then at least just have the timer go off at the 2-minute mark.
Yes, 1 moment.
Okay, and while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and allow the next speaker. Ms. Amoli Fowles.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the time that the accountability group has given us. I wanted to be sure that you are focused on not only our rights as civilians and our human rights, but also a question that was asked earlier was whether or not the cars of interest would be if they were parked somewhere in somebody's neighborhood, and this was a neighborhood that didn't have off-street parking where you have residents parked in front of their homes, would the license plates of the neighbors who are parked in front of their homes also be put through the data ringer with the car of interest? And that question was not answered directly. There was something about training and something about something else, but we didn't hear whether or not the rights of the people who own the house or the houses or the neighborhood who have to park on the street were going to be violated by the license plate readers. I would like to have that question answered by your staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose, were you able to get the timer? Or?
Yes.
Okay, and I do want to just address that, and it wasn't my intention to avoid that question. There are some logistical questions in how this technology is going to be used, some investigative logistics that it's not clear to our office or to the board at this moment. In general, though, if there's a vehicle of interest, the police department can enter that into the database. Again, they will still need to meet established legal thresholds to take any enforcement action. But I apologize if I attempted to answer that question earlier and didn't do it with satisfaction, but I can definitely register that question and then follow up with the police department if so they can provide more guidance or clarity on that particular matter. If we could go on to the next speaker.
Okay. JP, you have been granted permission to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First, I'd like to comment that the first caller, the crimes that the first caller was concerned about, that the setup of the APLRs as they're presented, none of the crimes that caller mentioned would be affected in any way whatsoever by the ALPR. They would not be caught, they would not be detected. The APLRs are proposed to ring the city, not be downtown around the police station. But more than that, I would like to address the question of the effectiveness of the ALPRs, and the PAB has questioned the effectiveness and said that there is not a lot of data on the effectiveness of ALPRs. But I would like to suggest that there is a vast amount of data on the effectiveness of ALPRs, and that the PAB and the city council and the police need to look at it. And that data is the crime statistics for the United States over the last couple of decades, right? ALPRs are said to reduce the rate of crimes, of certain crimes, of all crime, depending on who you listen to, okay? But if you look at the data, and this is readily available online, just look at the data, you will see that most crimes were reduced over the time from about the year 2000 to the year 2010 or 2012. Before ALPRs were ever deployed on a massive scale in the United States. And then if you look at the crime data from 2012 for the next 10 years, what you will see is that crimes remained the same or increased, right? So, but that was exactly the time when ALPRs were deployed en masse throughout the United States. So the rate of auto theft, instead of going down in the last decade, actually went up a little bit. So there is no evidence whatsoever through this massive database across the entire US that ALPRs reduce the theft of auto rate. If you look at murders, you'll see the same thing. If you look at the general crime rate, you'll see the same thing. So there is no effectiveness to this technology. It doesn't do what it's advertised to do, even though anecdotally, of course, you can find a couple of circumstances where it catches something or whatever. But en masse, statistically, it simply is not effective. And therefore, the cost is essentially infinite because you're spending money that could be better used, that could be infinitely better used elsewhere because it just doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Steve Revelet. Should be allowed to speak. I'll start the timer once you unmute. And I apologize if I mispronounced your last name.
Oh, you got it correctly. Thank you very much. I'm going to just start off on Wednesday, June 21st of this year. A man attacked a summer exchange female student near College Avenue and Hay Street. In an effort to sexually assault her, he had followed her from a bar near campus near Telegraph and Durant. BPD sex crime detectives investigated, and they were able to identify the suspect and his car in surveillance footage. Saturday, June 24th, the suspect was arrested around midnight. BPD patrol officer noticed the vehicle license plate and the male occupant that matched the wanted person. The district attorney has charged the suspect with kidnapping to commit a sex crime and assault with intent to commit a sex crime. Why do I mention this? The suspect felt completely comfortable to go back to the city of Berkeley to hunt more victims. Just 3 days earlier, he had dragged a 21-year-old female into the bushes, sexually assaulted her, and got away. While BPD did excellent police work investigating and ultimately arresting the suspect was so confident to roam the city of Berkeley and commit more criminal acts just 3 days later. If BPD would have had a readily available assistive technology, in the case, ALPRs, placed in strategic locations throughout the city, the suspect most likely would not have had the opportunity to hunt victims again 3 additional days. It also should be noted that the suspect was emboldened that he was arrested just a half block where he originally stalked his first victim. Berkeley residents, students, visitors deserve and implore the Police Accountability Board, in partnership with the community, to approve and utilize license plate readers as proposed by the Berkeley Police Department. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're going ahead and we're going to adjust the time to 2:30 for the interest of time to make sure that we can get community members that are waiting to speak. We'll go ahead and you're muted, Jose. I don't know.
Sorry, just one moment.
And I'll go ahead and allow the next speaker while you're doing that. LM, you're on right now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, good evening. And I appreciate the initial presentation where you guys really shared objectively both sides of the issue. And I really appreciate you asking to listen intently and be open-minded. And first speaker talking really struck the chord with me and definitely can relate to all the crime that it's happening and makes me think, what can we all do to prevent it and to catch criminals as soon as possible? So therefore, I'm really here to show the support for ALPR and some on a call already mentioned, but Transparency Hub that was established here in Berkeley. Actually, there is a 60% increase in car theft and 50% increase in overall crime. all this is happening while police is understaffed by 20 to 30%. In neighboring cities, mentioned Vacaville or in San Mateo and others, data actually shows that theft has decreased by 30% since the installation of these readers. It also shows that getting this information improves efficiency, to what Steve was talking about, and lower times needed for police to investigate the crimes. It actually also minimizes police presence needed to monitor, interact with individuals causing crimes. Also, this technology is already used for collecting parking tickets, and it's even also done without actual police being present. Ticket just arrives to the address for the person to pay. So if this technology makes me think, if this technology is used to enforce parking and for city profits, I sure hope it can be used to protect these really crime-ridden communities where criminals are really brazen and come back day after day to commit the crimes. I hear concern about privacy as well. And what we know is that technology captures license plate, make of the car, color of the car, which actually none of them are personal identifiers, and therefore risk is very low of privacy issues. I agree that measures need to be put around this technology and access and security, but it's done many times in many technologies where privacy is the problem. So I believe really that pros for this technology outweigh the cons, and it's really high time for Berkeley to increase its focus on proactively preventing crimes and capturing ones who commit crime as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen, for your comment. Jose, are we able to get the timer up? That was on.
Yes.
Okay, and I do also want to just highlight one point that the last speaker made. She indicated she went on the Transparency Hub, and that is something that we hope that more community members are engaging with that data. It is an important tool that community members have at their disposal to be able to look at these trends and these patterns. So thank you for plugging that in here. Okay. Next speaker, please.
Okay. AT, you have permission to speak. As soon as you're unmuted, I'll get the timer going.
Hi, thank you for giving me a chance to give in comments. Okay, I'm the parents for UC Berkeley. The UC Berkeley has already earned the #3 spot on the list of most dangerous college ranking by the Business Insider with a recent Berkeley amounting of 23,000. The safety issue in Berkeley is already rotten. Everybody knows this is not a safe city to stay, to live, and to hang out. You think the criminal didn't know that? They know this is a city that is so easy to commit crime, and they have so many of easy target, which what I mean is the Cal students. So now any tools that will help to reduce the crime is a must-go item. We do not have enough police personnel in Berkeley, but at least to establish an image to make Berkeley a city that's hard to commit crime. Many Bay Area cities already have license plate readers. Again, let me remind you, City of Vacaville reported a 33% decrease in vehicle thefts and a 35% increase in related arrests in connection with the ALPR program. If we don't catch up, all the criminals will start flowing our directions. And citizens in Berkeley, which will including the Cal students, the easy target, will become the victims of this proposal rejection. By them, I think, who is responsible for that? You know, think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, Roberto, you have been granted permission to speak. I have restarted the timer, and as soon as you're unmuted, we'll get that going.
Yes, hi, good evening. Thank you for providing us with such useful information in regards to the ALPRs. Really appreciate it. I'd like to start off with giving a shout out to all of the victims, our hardworking victims that have been victims of theft and violent crime. People that have worked hard to purchase an automobile that has been stolen. People that have bought multiple catalytic converters, that have to put their hard-earned money into such purchases because we are not willing to spend money to protect these people. And I cannot even speak of the people that have been victims of violent crimes, some of which were mentioned earlier tonight. I think it's time to do some common sense police work. And the ALPRs will provide us with the opportunity to do so. We are in danger of falling behind some of our neighboring communities in regards to this type of technology. So common sense policing, I'm sorry, is long overdue. The problem is that we are lacking common sense decision making, and I think it's about time we put an end to that. Being able to track a stolen car or a person, a child that has just been abducted. I mean, people talk about the cost of this and the reliability and so forth. We need to start talking about what can be done with this technology, such as being able to save an abducted child. And we know that in Berkeley, things like this have been attempted, abductions of adults and children alike. So I just want to say that, please, let's have a little bit more common sense. Let's put our politics aside. Let's look at technology. We consider our city to be progressive. Well, now's the time to take a step forward by catching up to everybody else. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Okay, now we have former council member Cheryl Davila. You have been allowed permission to speak.
Hi, so we already heard from many people. I agree with Maury, Kit, and the people that are in opposition of these ALPRs. They don't prevent crimes. They might aid in solving them, but it's going to all be after the fact. But if you invested in community and humanity and people and created jobs and opportunities, that will also reduce crime. And what you don't realize is that these ALPRs will track each and every one of us. And we already know that the Berkeley's police department has documented history and probably present, because during COVID it increased, which is the racial disparity in stops. This is well documented in the CPE report, in the draft report. Since COVID, racial profiling has gone up. So to give this a tool to a police department that doesn't treat people equally or fairly, inequitably, is going to be, increase the problem that already exists. And for instance, I know someone like that went out to Dublin with someone that had been arrested. And so when they entered the town, they knew that they entered because of their license plate readers. It was either Dublin or Livermore. They got pulled over on their way home out of that town. and that they knew where they went. They knew that they didn't purchase anything when they went shopping in the mall. They knew what stores they went in the mall. This is the tracking that can happen. And it can also impact transgender folks that are coming here for whatever reasons from another state, immigrants, you know, all kinds of things, people that come to this area to receive abortions or that type of situation. So it can be used against us, and it's going to mostly impact Black and Brown Indigenous people. So that's what I would say. Invest in humanity and opportunities to prevent crime, not these license plate readers that are gonna make the problem worse for BIPOC communities. Thank you.
Thank you. George Littman, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question for you, staff. But first I want to assume for the moment that everybody here, everybody in this conversation supports both security and civil rights and civil liberties. My question therefore is, will there be appropriate oversight to make sure that any misuse of the data, possibly by improper sharing of data on the cloud, can be determined? I know that you've had difficulty as the PAB and the Office of the DPA getting across access to departmental data, even though the city's charter gives you that power. So I don't know if this has come up. I think people were asking before, well, what's the format going to be? Where is this going to be stored? Is it going to be stored in the cloud? Will there be a mechanism that's guaranteed that that can guarantee that it not be shared or taken by other agencies, such as those that may be up to nefarious purposes, like who's going to California to get abortions, whatever the case may be. So that's my question. Will there be a chance for the board or the office to take a look at the data and see that that it's being taken care of appropriately? And you know, we want to think the best of authority. We also need checks and balances, just like they have in Washington, D.C., and we need to not demean the oversight bodies as some in Washington are doing at this moment. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. I'll say, are you able to adjust the time to 2 minutes? I just want to make sure we get as many members of the public. And members of the public, just if we have been adjusting the time as you've seen to make sure we get as many voices here tonight. I do want to just acknowledge that again, that the police department did respond back to some of the board's concerns in the discussions over the last few weeks. There have been concerns expressed by this office and the board about the accountability portion. And I do know that there's language in the revised policies about access to information for the board and the office pursuant to investigations. There also is an internal audit function that that is embedded within this proposed policies. So the department, the administrator will be doing internal audits, and those audits will be made available to the board and the office.
Okay. Christopher Kohler, you have been granted permission to speak.
Greetings, everybody. I'm going to address a couple of things here, some of which touches upon what previous speakers have already raised. And one of the things that I think is important is that when looking at data and that kind of information, it's easy to make mistaken assumptions out of it. And I hear some of that, I think, tonight. I had an experience with an ALPR use that bit me hard, violated my civil rights badly. And it happened in a way that I don't know that anybody could have anticipated. So here's a couple of things. We have had ALPRs here in Berkeley, a couple of them for years. People don't always know that. They've been used by the Parking Enforcement Division. They drive around with them. They read the places they go, and they give them an alert if there's some liability. And I had a vehicle that got booted here in Berkeley. And I called in and I had a long conversation with the sergeant of that division. And we noticed that my outstanding tickets were all the most trivial kind. Improper display of a disability placard, some time in the morning when the whole day was reserved for street sweeping. I didn't prevent any. So I was using my truck at the time for emergency lodging. I was in between places. And so they granted me that they would return the vehicle to me. I could have more time to spend the tickets, and I'd have more time to do some flea markets, raise some money to pay it all down. The next day, my truck was booted again. This is on a Friday night. And I called the boot company. Now, here's where it gets complex. We have the officer that booted it, called in the boot, the company that handles the boots, and they're the people I called. And we decided with the customer service rep that it was a mistaken booting, that the officer had driven by, those tickets were still on the record. They alerted the officer, who did not read the notes attached to the file. And in those notes were documented my conversation with the sergeant and the arrangement we had made. She didn't see those, so she had it booted again. So I thought they were going to send somebody out and take it off. They didn't. Later that evening, I discovered that the boot was unlocked. So I took it off. And I called into the sergeant. I left voice messages about what should I do now. She never returned my calls. I called again the following week, and the boot company, who told me I was liable for a tow because I hadn't come in and paid everything off like we were supposed to do when you're booted. And I said it was a mistake, and they hadn't confirmed it. They hadn't done anything. So later that week, my truck, in fact, was towed. They had actually been going out to find the truck to take the boot off, saw that the truck was moved, figured that I broke the boot, and just on that assumption, they towed the truck. I finally got it out again, and I found out that the police department uses a couple of different databases. They use a state one for criminal, they use an internal one for their purposes. I don't know if this is going to be a third one, but what we're going to have is similar things where the operator using the ALPR for a particular purpose may or may not be fully informed of everything they need to know before an act is made. That kind of complexity, I'm not clear on. I've not seen any presentations that satisfy me on that. The other thing I want to point out is that in the same data that was used a couple of years ago to show racial disparity, actually what was actually shown by that was almost all of those stops that were racially disparate were overnight. And it's a national standard among all the experts that it's when you see that disparity in the daylight that you see a bias, because at night, it's much harder to even see the race of an individual. So really what that data showed was that our police department is dramatically less racially biased than others. And it shows one other thing that I've not seen addressed as well, which is it may be at night we have a higher racial mix of one kind or another in Berkeley driving on the streets, in which case that could be part of the disparity as well. I'm seeing that these ALPRs are intended to ring the city to look for incoming and outgoing traffic, which says to my mind that they're looking for people not from Berkeley, or they want to track them for that reason. And that would only be certain crimes, I think. So I'm not comfortable with the ALPRs unless that complexity is addressed, and an innocent person shouldn't have to go through a lot of stuff. I ended up losing my truck because of it. That people ought to be protected from things like that. Secondly, if we have vendors and we have several databases and we have complexity, that has to get really well addressed before we rely on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to just give another gentle reminder about the time. We're going to adjust it to 1 minute per speaker. We're going to acknowledge the next 6 speakers that have their hands raised. We are trying to provide as much opportunity. Do remember that the board is going to have a meeting on July 12th, which is next week. They do have public comment sections. This item will be on the agenda. If you want to share additional thoughts and commentary, you're also more than welcome to email us. We'll make sure that the email address is provided and available for your review before you leave the session tonight. So the next few speakers are going to have 1 minute, please.
Good evening. Thanks very much. Just a couple of comments. First, the point on crime statistics. The only real stable variable that remains stable over time because of how things get reported is homicide rates, and they've dipped to some extent, which is true. But we still have horrendous homicide rates. We have the highest rates of pretty much any country other than those experiencing active conflict. So the other types of crimes are simply going unreported or reported at much lower rates, and they've changed a lot over time. Second, I really just caution about a recommendation of the level of study you're suggesting is necessary is effectively a case control study, which would cost much more than the implementation of the policy. So simply implement the policy and do what everyone does, evaluate it and see what its impact is over time under real world conditions. Thank you.
You're muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for this. And by the way, on many meetings that put up a clock, you can politely cut the mic so that it can actually be adhered to. First of all, I've been the victim of assaults, stolen vehicles, hit and runs, rape, etc. So I really empathize with anyone that is hurt. It's horrible to be violated. However, this is a complex issue. We have multiple crime sources. Some are just because it's so darn profitable. It is extremely profitable to be in organized crime. So there's that. But then more generally, we have desperate people, desperate, overwhelmed, terrified people struggling to survive. So putting money to support people, in my view, is preventing the harm. And that's, an ounce of prevention is definitely worth a pound of cure. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the caller ending with 787.
Hello?
Okay, yeah. Yes, we could hear you.
Yes. I believe prevention is starts with our youth programs. We eliminated free recreation programs, a prevention outlet to grow our children into productive human beings. I disagree with your proposal. I have been victimized by police and also have been victim of kidnap and rape. However, implicit bias is a well-documented, it does exist. I'm convinced if my license is seen, I will automatically be seen as guilty or involved in bad behavior. How will this procedure eliminate implicit bias, the practice of bigotry and hatred?
And we just want to confirm that that's the end of your comment in terms of the question. Director?
Yes, if we can move to the next speaker at this time, we're just trying to make sure the last few speakers have an opportunity to speak.
Okay. Okay, the speaker with Citizen 5.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Greetings, thank you. My name is Starchild, and I am strongly against any additional surveillance. I want the surveillance that is already being unconstitutionally imposed on us to be eliminated. I understand some people are concerned about crime, but as I posted in the questions, I don't know if everyone can read those. I would ask them to be unblocked so that people can read them because I put in a link with some background information. given that the government has actually stolen more money from people in the US in recent years than petty criminals, that's all petty criminals combined. That's not even counting non-consensual taxation, but simply money and property seized in forfeitures, where they put the burden on you, the victim, to show that your resources were not involved in criminal activity in order to get your money or property back. Isn't it the height of stupidity, if your goal is to reduce crime, to put more power in the hands of government, the #1 criminal organization in the United States, by giving them more power to monitor and track people and potentially seize their resources? And that's my question. And in question United, there's a link to a story confirming this allegation, how in the past 20 years, they've stolen $68 billion in forfeitures from American citizens. And ProPublica says that for some law enforcement agencies, forfeiture funds have been as much as 20% of their budgets. And quote, most of this money and property is coming from poorer people, unquote. And they say that's particularly frustrating when you consider the penalty pittances paid by most white-collar criminals. So government using its information to go after people, and primarily poor people who are more likely to be brown, black, et cetera, to seize their money. And then people don't have the resources to fight them to get their property back. And if you allow more surveillance, you're enabling more of this kind of theft from the #1 criminal organization in the United States, and that is the government. And I would like to hear responses. Thank you.
Thank you for your commentary. As we mentioned, at this time, we're not going to be responding back. We will be moving the discussion to the Police Accountability Board meeting. If you're interested in engaging further, if you can allow the next speaker, please.
Rivka Palachnik.
This is Rivka Palatnik. I urge you to keep in mind the bigger picture of what public safety means. Certainly, we all are unhappy with crime, but public safety includes having the means to survive, live a thriving life, and people deprived of that may turn to crime. But also look at the budget, because the issues of cost are important, and effectiveness, because there are so many competing claims for the limited money that we have. And when something like this gets funded and it turns out to be much more expensive than at first look, that means that other things are not getting funded, are being cut. And programs that do prevention and intervene with youth and hire community members who themselves got in gangs or crime, who regret it and are really eager to mentor youth and lead them away from crime. There's all kinds of alternative ways to reduce crime that don't cost an enormous fortune. And I am afraid that this is going to end up costing an enormous price at the expense of other really important that would help our public safety. So please, keep that in mind.
Thank you. Okay. Wendy Gibson.
Hello, thank you for having me. Wanted to read this real quick. This is the Berkeley Police Association tweet. Monday morning, the entire understaffed graveyard team was on a home invasion robbery with 4 in custody. Then a group of criminals committed a commercial burglary on 4th Street. We had no officers to send. Next time it could be you that needs help when we have no officers available. Using technology to aid the police department helps our community. It's not a zero-sum game. We can invest in humanity, and we can also invest in technology that makes our community safer. While technically not preventing a crime in process, these readers can prevent future crimes, because once they start helping capture criminals, other criminals will decide they will have a higher chance of getting caught if they want to do bad things in Berkeley. In addition, catching criminals, repeat criminals, like a gentleman spoke earlier who was raping people, they're going to stop those crimes because you get those criminals off the streets. These readers do not know what you purchase at a mall or what stores you go into or the color of your skin. That's one of the things that makes them great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, and we're at our last speaker for tonight. Ingrid, you have been granted permission to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me the time and the opportunity to speak here. I wanted to mention that, like some other speakers have said, criminals usually flock to cities where they know there are holes in staffing. We know Berkeley right now is understaffed. Most of these criminals come from outside of the city to terrorize the residents of the city. And I think a misconception is that these license plate readers will catch or keep tabs on everybody. And the way they work is they're not going to track a license plate unless the license plate has been entered into the system based on a crime that has been reported, a stolen car or something like that. So I think for all those residents who are afraid that they're going to be targeted, I think this will solve their problem. It's just they're only going to catch people that have already committed crimes and have been known to. So I would appreciate if you can support this for the safety of all the Berkeley residents and the Cal Berkeley students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if, Ms. Murillo, if we could put the our contact information slide. That is going to conclude our opportunity for public comments. If you want to continue the discussion, we really appreciate that the feedback we received today. We want to strive to have more of these conversations. The city charter that establishes the office and the board does it's very clear about its intent of ensuring that there's community engagement when there's ever a policy review. So please do continue to participate in these discussions, participate in the Police Accountability Board meetings. There are always public comments. The information is listed on our website. Our email address is listed here. If you have any questions regarding this or any of the policies we discussed today, we want to make sure that any policy that is being considered by the police department, by the city council, is receiving a rigorous review to ensure that we're upholding the values of this community and ensuring that there will be appropriate accountability for compliance. So again, we appreciate the feedback that we received tonight. We want to make sure we continue this discussion. We will memorialize the commentary today that we received today and give it to the board at its next meeting. We're going to provide our agenda packet. Is going to include a lot of the comments and questions that have been provided tonight. So again, we thank you for your participation. Mr. Murillo, if you want to have any final thoughts for the community.
I just want to echo what the director has mentioned. We greatly appreciate your participation. We'd also appreciate any feedback in terms of this community input forum. One of the things we've already noted was the timing issue, and we apologize for the speakers that got less time towards the end. But it does make us happy that we were in a position where there's enough community members here to where the timing had to be shrunk down. So we'll work on that. But we also welcome any future feedback that you could have for us to help us make these sessions more useful for you, the community member, because at the end of the day, that's who we're here for. So thank you everyone for coming today.
Have a good night.